Progressive theologian William Sloane Coffin said, "Love seeks the truth, but fear seeks safety." Fear seeks safety. If we are paying attention to the national news or even to some of the overheard conversations in our neighborhoods, we are living in fear-filled times. In response, we are looking for safety. Now, this drive for safety is shared by all living things, although we express that protective response differently. For instance, tube worms will respond to a touch by disappearing into the sand. Caterpillars curl up into a ball. Some mammals travel in herds or packs. For us humans, building walls have been a popular method of protecting ourselves and our group of like-minded people, although sometimes some of us have been known to imitate the caterpillar and curl into balls. We form ourselves into communities for safety from the other, communities that will be safe from conflict that arises from differences. Most of us have come to accept that conflict is just a fact of human existence. While in our Naples congregation, the Reverend Katie Korb offered the opinion that we would only truly see each other as fellow human beings when aliens from a distant planet arrived on Earth. At that point, our tribal differences would evaporate, and we would unite in our identity as Homo sapiens, us, to repel the invaders, them. If this scenario sounds familiar, it's because you're recalling The Day the Earth Stood Still, or War of the Worlds, or the early Star Trek series where everyone was from Earth except Spock. And even Spock was portrayed in terms of being a sort of higher human form, the only Unitarian in a ship full of Universalists. I am inclined to believe that Reverend Korb had it right because I see this tendency to differentiate between us and them in myself and in everyone I know. Deep in my bones, I understand the yearning to belong to a specific tribe. The developers of retirement communities and continuing care facilities understand that. The comfort and security of being among your own kind is strong. The street where I now live is populated by educators, artists, chefs, and musicians. I'm almost ashamed of my delight. But I know there is another, more expansive way to look at human communities. Prophets like Gandhi, Muhammad, Lao Tse, Martin Luther King Jr., Julian of Norwich, Jesus of Nazareth, Sophia Lyons-Foss, Gene Roddenberry, and Baha'u'llah, among others, all of them envisioned a world where human differences were a source of delight, where the differences were retained and complemented other differences. It was the image of a salad bowl rather than a melting pot. That salad bowl image more accommodates the reality of our American demographics, especially in the major urban areas of our country. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to heed these visionaries. We are called to construct communities that are distinctive and reflective of us at specific time and place, while at the same time welcoming strangers who may eventually wish to join us. Ideally, all of us fruits and nuts are held in an ever-expanding bowl. That being the case, the question of today asks, how will you develop the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Lake County as a salad bowl community, as a beloved community? The story of Ezra and Nehemiah that you heard in the whistle stop, the word for all ages, contains all of the elements of building a community. First, Zerubbabel leads some Jews exiled in the Babylonian conquest back home to Jerusalem. They get reestablished there and begin rebuilding their destroyed city, starting with the temple. Second, Ezra shows up to teach the Torah, reminding the Jews of their spiritual and social identity. Third, Nehemiah arrives to build a physical structure, a wall around the city. This wall is physical evidence of the Jews' identity, their separateness from the non-Jews in the area. We do the same thing. Many of us are exiles from the religious communities of our childhood. By many paths, we have stumbled into a place that feels like home. Then, via our 7 principles, we're reminded of our spiritual and social identity. Finally, we build a physical structure that shows who we are. Your building is an outward and visible sign of you as Unitarian Universalists. By design, it keeps us in and keeps others out. It defines our boundaries. Over the course of my ministry, I have become a bit obsessed with Nehemiah's walls specifically, and walls in general. I think that this model of wall building serves a useful purpose. By defining the parameters, Nehemiah was also defining the community. The Jewish Reform Prayer Book expresses our situation this way. It says, standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before we ever stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. So, until we reached that promised land where we can meet each other without fear, we need to have boundaries to know where I leaves off and you begins. Without boundaries, the world is too much with us, and we sacrifice our place of safety and calm where we need to retreat so that we can recharge ourselves. If we don't feel safe, it's unlikely that we can help anyone else feel safe. I was going to use the example of face masks to protect us from COVID-19, but that presupposes that everyone thinks they're in danger, and that's far from true. So think of it like being on an airplane. Actually, I was just on an airplane, so I had the opportunity to rehear the flight attendant's instructions that in the event that oxygen is needed, to put on your oxygen mask first. Why? Because you can't be useful to anyone when you're gasping for air yourself. So why would you care if you're useful to someone else? Because you may have occasion to desperately need the help of that person sitting next to you, and you're out of luck if she's gasping for air too. So let's put on our masks. And let's examine the kinds of boundaries that we have in place to see if they're constructed so as to allow us to participate in the often frightening and confusing world while we're trying to change it. How are we going to use our walls to build beloved community? There are 3 types of walls. Physical barriers include the Great Wall of China, Hadrian's Wall, the Berlin Wall, the Wall of Famagusta, the walled city of Lucca, the walls of the Benin Empire in Nigeria, and of course, Nehemiah's walls of Jerusalem. Since the beginning of time, people have crouched behind physical barriers and hoped that people with agendas different from theirs would be kept out. Then there are our institutional walls, often called policies and programs. After the attack on the World Trade Centers, America threw up a wall called Homeland Security. How's that working for us? After hurricanes, we put new building codes into place. We repair the levees. Churches do this all the time. They write and rewrite policies and bylaws to reflect an event that has threatened the existence or even the status quo of the organization. By the way, it's never a good idea to create a policy based on a single event. Finally, there are our psychic walls. We Unitarian Universalists who suffer disproportionately from our national plague of individualism, we're particularly skilled at this sort of wall building. After our personal boundaries have been breached by illness, broken relationships, or other kind of losses, we build walls of self-reliance and we crouch behind those psychic barriers. Our psychic walls are manifested in phrases like, "It hardly hurts at all." "Thanks, but we'll manage." "It's no bother." "Don't worry about it." And my personal favorite, "I'm fine," spoken as tears are running down their faces. These nice phrases we've cultivated calm the fear of the listener that they will be asked to do something to address our lack of control or our weakness or, heaven forbid, our need for each other. I hope we can learn that what we are called to do in most situations is nothing more than to simply listen, to deeply, curiously, and openly listen to each other. Well, the idea of building walls to build a community is something of a paradox. There's a tension between the reality that walls function to keep people in and at the same time keep people out. We relieve that tension by the use of gates. Gates are the mechanisms by which people can come into the safety of their community and go out to be engaged in the world. Gates are the portal by which strangers enter, signifying their peaceful intentions. Think about it. With whom will you feel more at ease? Someone who comes through your front gate or someone who climbs over your wall? To illustrate the point, let's do a little game. Let's do a little exercise. Let's make a gate with your hands. First, turn the knuckles of your hands so that they're facing each other. If you've gone to Sunday school, you will recognize this. Then interlock your fingers. Now, move your wrists so that the palms of your hand are facing each other. Your fingers should be on the inside and your thumbs parallel. Next, try to wiggle your fingers. It's not easy, is it? Imagine them as people inside small, dark, cramped, enclosed space. Now, move your thumbs, the gates, in opposition. Roll your wrists back so that the back of your hands are facing each other. Now, wiggle your fingers. Isn't that easier? The gates are open, exposing the people inside to a wider world of sunlight and space and freedom of movement. To me, gates are a metaphor for the way in which you view your relationship with your community. Are your gates of the flat steel variety, or the open picket variety? Do you need a key to get through the gate, or is it loosely tied with a piece of old rope? Is it tall, or can you see over it? Is it hinged so that it easily swings open and shut, or do you have to make a real effort to move it? Does the color of the gate reflect who lives behind the walls? Does your gate say, "Come on in," or does it say, "Keep out"? I'm not asking you to tear down your boundary walls. I'm asking you to build in some gates with phrases like, "Tell me about it," or "I'd like to know how you came to that view," or "Would you help me?" At this moment in time, we are still, albeit partially, walled away from others. Most of our Unitarian Universalist communities are operating on a hybrid model, with some people attending in person, but masked, while others attend virtually. With COVID still among us, some of us have had to quarantine, to wall themselves in with no gates, for anywhere from a week to a month. I don't need to tell you how hard this has been for many of us. Even those of us who find relief in not having to dress up or travel are beginning to show the strain of our isolation from each other. And we don't have much of an idea on the long-term effects of this threatening, gateless environment. We began with the quote that love seeks the truth, but fear seeks safety. Sometimes the life of the Spirit calls a people to a harder and more difficult path than safety. It is that perspective that I summon you to this morning. The efforts of Ezra and Nehemiah didn't result in a beloved community. All of the teachings, adherence to the letter of the law, and construction of boundary walls kept them safe for a time. But those efforts didn't change people's hearts. Unless and until hearts are changed, beloved community remains an ideal. We Unitarian Universalists are in the business of changing hearts. Indeed, the life of any liberal religious community is called to change hearts. We do that by constructing gates in the walls around our hearts so that we can continue to promote and witness to the vision of beloved community. As an institution, we do that despite the wall of public health necessity. We have and we continue to construct gates in our communities. Our gates, your gates, are these regular Sunday services, the educational offerings, the team meetings, the small groups. We have lots of gates where people can enter and connect with others, and they do. Depending on the talent and the financial resources available, we can punch through even more gates. It is my vision that eventually there will be more gates than walls surrounding UUCLC. And the ideals of this community will spill out and freely circulate beyond its boundaries. And hearts will be changed. Hearts will be changed. May it be so. Amen. And now, please rise in body or spirit to sing all three verses of hymn number 1008 in the Teal Book, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.